Hey, we're in Luke chapter 7. You want to get started? Both of you want to get started? All right, let's get going. Luke chapter 7, verse 18. The disciples of John the Baptist reported to him about all these things that Jesus was doing. Summoning two of his disciples, John sent them to the Lord, saying, "Are you the expected one, or do we look for someone else?" When the men came to him, they said, "John the Baptist has sent us to you, Jesus, to ask, are you the one, expected one, or do we look for someone else?" At that very time, he cured many people of diseases and afflictions and evil spirits, and he gave sight to many who were blind. And he answered and said to them, "Go and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, the poor have the gospel preached to them, and blessed is he who does not take offense at me." So, I've heard this preached over the course of my 46 years many ways. And about 4 different ways people preach these verses about John the Baptist sending for Jesus. The most common one is that the proof that the Messiah is here is that the blind receive sight, the lame walk, the afflictions are healed, and the gospel is preached to the poor. And it's kind of a story used to incite faith in a healing service, a time where we use it for that. And it's John the Baptist asking Jesus to prove he's the one, and the proof that he's the one is that people are healed. And that's the one I've heard most. Most of you heard that one too. You know, that's how it's. And there's several other takes on these verses. And there's a fourth one that you don't hear very often, but it's the one that John the Baptist asked Jesus, "Are you the one?" And Jesus says, "Go tell him this evidence that I'm the one." And the motive behind the asking of John the Baptist is the one that's in question to me. You remember that John the Baptist, his mother is told by an angel, "You're going to have a baby." And it's, how can this be? Sarah just shared it on Wednesday night about how can this be? We're old. And so this miracle occurs that John the Baptist is conceived in his mother. Well, Mary has a visit from an angel, and the same thing. How is this possible? I haven't been with no man. Well, the Holy Spirit will come upon you. There'll be this miracle. They're a few months apart, and when Mary walks into Elizabeth's house, John the Baptist, a baby inside of his mother's womb, leaps in her womb, and Elizabeth says, "Oh my gosh, our Redeemer has arrived. Even the baby inside my womb knows it." So we have, from the earliest humanly possible time, positive proof John the Baptist knows who Jesus is. We have John the Baptist baptizing Jesus in the Jordan River, and a dove comes down and lands on Jesus. The Holy Spirit, as a dove, comes down and lands on Jesus. A voice from heaven speaks and says, "This is my son." John the Baptist knows what that means. And so here we are years later, John the Baptist, and we're believing that John the Baptist is literally asking, "Are you him?" He's his cousin. They've been around each other their whole life. Their mothers know each other well. And he's asking, "Are you the one?" As if he doesn't know. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth. John the Baptist is not asking, "Are you the one?" And Jesus is not saying, "Here's the proof of the one." That isn't the proof. What's really happening is John the Baptist has been arrested after spending his whole life preparing the way for the one to come, believing that the one would do certain things, having the one pigeonholed in this idea, just like we later see Judas had Jesus pigeonholed, and we all think Judas just betrayed Jesus because he's a betrayer. No, Judas betrayed Jesus to get him to act upon what Judas believed Jesus should do. That was a tongue twister. Peter pulls a sword and cuts a slave's ears off, facing 600 soldiers, because it's like, "Come on, Jesus. Come on. It's time." And John the Baptist is doing something very similar. He's sending his disciples to say, and this is 21st century vernacular, hey, dude, are you the one or not? I'm in jail. I'm suffering. They're torturing me. Aren't you going to do something? When are you going to take over? And what he expected Jesus to say is, my armies are amassing. Caesarea is about to fall. The angels are armed and ready. And the wrath of God is being poured out. But that isn't what Jesus said. It's like, go back and tell him that I'm healing the sick. I'm preaching the gospel to the poor. Just as the prophet said I would. I'm doing exactly what the prophet said the one would do. Not what your political parties said the one would do. Not what your religious leaders said the one would do. I'm doing what I said I would do. Sins are being forgiven. The lowly are being brought to life. The mighty are being brought down. The gospel is being preached to the poor. John the Baptist is really saying, aren't you going to save me? Aren't you going to do what I wanted you to do? Aren't you going to fit perfectly or in the shape I created you to be? Or aren't you going to do anything? And Jesus is saying, I am doing something. I'm doing exactly what I was meant to do. What Jesus is really saying, here it is. John the Baptist is saying, aren't you going to come and overthrow the Romans? Aren't you going to break me out of this jail? Aren't you going to set me free? Aren't you going to punish them for who they are? And Jesus is saying, go tell him that the love of God is being poured out. The mercy of God has arrived. The blind are being seeing. The lepers are being cleansed. The lame are walking. The gospel is being preached to the poor. And you see, for me, the overthrow of Rome really 2,100 years later would have very little effect. If that was the effect of the one, then this would be no different than Samson's effect for me, or Daniel in the lion's den for me. It would have no effect for me. But Jesus' method, his plan for what the one should do, has saved me. It's made it possible for me to know God and to be known by him. I met Jesus Christ one day, and I got to tell you, earlier that day, I did not know him. Later that day, I knew him. It was strange. I stood in a parking lot, didn't know what to do with this. All my life, all I really wanted to know is he real? And all of a sudden, in the twinkling of an eye, I knew he was real. And I prayed a prayer. I said, could you help me never forget what it was like not to know you were real? I would like to never forget that feeling, because I know me. I'll be all a glitter in this stuff and forget. Oh, think I was always like this. I'll forget how hateful I was. I'll forget how angry I was. I'll forget how mean I was or how lost I was. I'll forget how trapped, even though I wasn't locked up by the Romans, I was locked up. Even though I wasn't in prison, my soul was in jail. I was bound. Even though America said I was in the land of the free, I was bound, walking around in chains. The blood of Jesus broke every chain and set me free. And it was in a 20-second prayer. That's right. It was a 20-second prayer, and I knew something just happened. He's real. He did not reject me. Could you help me never forget what that was like? Because John the Baptist was down in that dungeon. They were planning his death, and he knew it. And he's crying out to Jesus, hey, dude, aren't you going to do something about this? Are you the one or not? The angel said you were the one. I've known all my life you're the one. The Father from heaven said you're the one. Aren't you going to do anything? Later, Jesus goes ahead and says it. We'll study it next week. There's nobody greater than John, born of woman. No human being conceived of man and woman has ever been greater than John because of the task he was given to make straight the way to the Lord. And the task he was given was the baptism of repentance and the forgiveness of sins. And John the Baptist was faithful in it. He didn't let himself get carried away by riches. He wore camel hair. He ate locust and honey, didn't get into all the feasts and everything, didn't try to be anyone important. He stayed low, came in low and slow. He did it really well, and he expected his reward was going to be different than prison and a beheading. Can man outgive God? I am faithful. Are you going to be unfaithful to me? Hey, dude, are you the one or not? Go back and tell him. The poor are receiving the gospel. The blind are receiving their sight. Lepers are receiving cleanliness. Lives are being given back to people. They're being made free. Their chains are being broken. Go tell him that. The thing he didn't have to tell John the Baptist was to remember what the prophet said. Remember what I said I would be. I'm being exactly that. The mercy of God is being poured out. A restorer of streets to dwell in. One who makes all things brand new. One who restores sight to the blind. I got to tell you, my sight's gotten worse in the physical, like you're all blurry. But I got to tell you, my spiritual sight has been sharpened every day for 46 years. I continue to be amazed at how clear I see. And I wonder how I even survived in my Christianity seeing as blurry as I did 20 years ago. And back then I thought I saw pretty clear. I'm amazed that it keeps getting clearer. The truth keeps getting clearer. The light keeps getting brighter. The realness of God just keeps getting more real. He keeps calling on me to go further up and farther in. I keep thinking, man, we're good. Let's stay right here. This is awesome. Can we just stay here? Things are getting dark out there. Let's stay. Let's stop things for a moment. And no, we're going further up and farther in. And the further up you go and the farther in you go, the darker that's going to get out there. Your light's going to be brighter. The contrast is going to be more. You're going to see more darkness. You're going to see more light. You get it? The sharper you see, the more bad stuff you see. Dude, are you the one or not? What would prove to you I'm the one? Well, bad things don't happen to me so much. I got to tell you, I actually made the stupid comment one day about after, I was probably a Christian 40 years, I don't know, maybe 35, I don't know when it was. But I made the mistake of saying, man, my life's like a fairy tale. Nothing bad ever happens to me. I don't know why I ever said that, but I mean, it was just the truth. Nothing bad ever happens to us. We just live a fairy tale life. Seems like it comes at us and then it just goes around us. Well, about that time, things started happening. Business started failing. The worldwide economy crashed. My business failed. I ended up for the first time in my life having one full-time job, pastoring the Father's House Church. Instead of 2 full-time jobs for all those years, 4 kids, all that stuff, I suddenly had one job. My house burns down. My father dies. My mother has Alzheimer's. My good, close associate pastor dies slowly. My granddaughter dies after a 3-year battle with leukemia, every day of which was dark and ugly and horrible, with some bright things happening in it. This just wasn't the God I thought he was. This just wasn't the reward for faithfulness I thought was mine. I'd even made the statement that the reward for faithfulness is the trip through the tulips and how wonderful things are and how everything goes well. I said many times, there's no way my house will burn. There's no way my business will fail. You can't outgive God, can you? It just depends. I think that there was a time in my life where I really, truly I finally made him the one more clearly than I'd ever made him the one before in my life. And he said, good, you'll be able to handle these things. You're finally ready to stand before men and tell them who I am. And I've seen a lot of that stuff. I've been on a streak. I'm on a losing streak. And I got to tell you, Vicki and I loved our house. It was like we just walked, we said, this is the Lord's house. I swore to her, it'll never burn. It's the Lord's house. And then it burnt and there wasn't nothing this big left. It was just like gone, ashes. It was just like gone. Everything, all the pictures, all the videos of the Little League, everything. All our memories, it was so much gone, it was unbelievable. And it was like, we're going to boo-hoo and cry. And like, well, dude, are you the one or not? I've served you. I've given my whole life. How'd you let my house burn down? Well, I didn't say that. I said, Lord, it was your house. I guess you can burn it down if you want to. Amen. I'm sorry I spoke up and said you would never let my house burn down. Sorry I said that. Right. So what's the plan? Where are we going from here? I kind of feel like a fool telling everyone, my house is fine. It belongs to the Lord. Well, a year later, to the day, it burned down on July 8th. We moved in on July 8th. I rebuilt that house. I rebuilt a house with my friends. And during that year, I got to tell you, I've never received more love in my life. I've never seen more love from human beings. I actually renewed my whole attitude about human beings, about faithfulness, about people betraying me, about people letting me down. It so built a rock foundation under me that on the day I moved into this new house and we looked around like, how do we get to live in this house? This is so much better than the old one. Everything's new. Everything's new and beautiful. And she's never got to design a house. I built hundreds. She's never got to design one, especially for her to live in. And she got to be in the everyday planning and building of this house. For the first time in her life, she had her house. I mean, it sounds petty, but it was like, we could never have dreamed up burning our house down so that we could have this. We never would have done that. We could have stood on a hill saying, but we were faithful. Are you the one or not? Are you faithful or not? Instead, on that particular subject, we said, he's faithful. What's next? At that time, we were struggling through our granddaughter being sick at the same time. There are things way more important than a house. And so by the time that house got done, and it was amazing. And we look back on the day that our business failed, and it was like, Vicki spent a night in a closet crying. I spent a couple of months in agony. My business failed. I lost 40-some houses in foreclosure. I lost mass amounts, $8.5 million in equity. I was sitting like in a pile of ashes, wondering, what did I do wrong? Can you outgive God? I was basically saying, hey, dude, are you faithful or what? I mean, are you with me or not? I thought you were with me. And I understood John the Baptist. Are you the one or not? We walked out of this courthouse, and we both looked at each other and felt like we'd been set free from the bondage of sin and death. I mean, we both said, pinch yourself. Is this heaven or is this a dream or what? We've never felt more glorious than that day. This is the beginning of the rest of our life, and this is the most incredible day of our life. And we walked out of that business failure just shocked at the glory of God. And we have lived far better since the day that happened. We live like we're rich and we don't have any money. We do. And it's like, I'm really smart at making money, and I'm really smart at building houses, and I can go out and do a business building houses and make lots of money. But I mean, you are so stressed and you are so bound by all the bills coming and all collecting all the money. It's just massive undertaking, as well as pastoring a church. And since that day, I haven't had to do any of that. I've just had to pastor a church and watch God take care of me. And watch God take care of a church that I could no longer take care of. So I've been where John the Baptist is. Nobody was coming to cut my head off, but I think a couple of the things, my granddaughter passing away, my friend Jordy passing away, and a few other things like that, I imagine some people in the room, those were almost as horrible as someone coming with a sword or someone coming with an axe. Hey, dude, are you who you said you were? And Jesus said, I'm exactly who I said I was. I'm just not who you said I was. Are you hearing me? And I think that's our biggest problem in Christianity. I probably know way more people that don't go to church, that used to go to church, that don't believe, that used to believe, than I do that do believe. So many have fallen away. So many friends are in prison that you would never even, they would never be there. They're in prison because their Christianity behind closed doors was not the same as their Christianity in public. So many. And I think they're crying out from jail, dude, how did you let this happen to me? And he's saying, I didn't let that happen to you. You let that happen to you. That was never who I was, to protect you while you were committing larceny, to protect you while you were immoral. No, the blind were seeing, justice was being served, the poor were receiving the gospel of truth and peace. People were getting to know that God was real. And I know for me, I walked outside and looked up, saw a magnolia tree and was shocked. I've looked at many magnolia trees and never once had one look like that. And it's like, you've already changed me to where I look at a magnolia tree different. Air feels different. Could you please never let me forget what that was like? I fell in love. It was really not at the altar that I fell in love. It was more like outside in front of a magnolia tree. About 5 minutes later, I fell in love. And I have never turned back. And I've never thought the cost was too high. I have had my days where it's like, what's up, dude? Where are you? Have you forsaken me? No. But being with you might look different than what you said it would look like. But it's not different than what I said it would look like. And so I think we should really continue to read his words and look at his truth and say, I want what you say. I want to look at what I do have and stop complaining about what I don't have, because when I complain about what I don't have, or I complain about what it costs, what the energy it takes, the time it uses up to serve him, and I complain about those things, I have a feeling I'm being a little bit like John the Baptist when Jesus says, blessed are you who have no offense and take no offense in me. Our inner healing officers are constantly having the prayer about, I forgive God. Well, that's not a very healthy place to be. And if you have that, you should be in the inner healing offices. But what you shouldn't have is any ability to need to forgive God, because you're so into whatever you say, not what I say. Whatever you believe, not what I believe. Whatever you want, not what I want. I must decrease, and my opinions and my preconceptions of who you are should be decrease, so that you and what you say about yourself might increase. If you know about our SOT Light, our SOT on the Move, the goal of that is to help communicate who is God. Who does he say he is? Not who do we say he is. John the Baptist knew this, absolutely. We have positive proof he knew this. And he sends two guys to say, who are you, dude? He says, I'm exactly who I said I was. The mercy of God has arrived in Israel. The love of God has arrived in Israel. And the gospel is being preached to the poor. Rejoice. And hear this. You're going to be way more blessed if you take no offense in me. Are you hearing me? And I think sometimes, I know I've read this story a couple million times, and don't hear it. We just don't get told. And it's like we just bypass the fact, wait a minute, this guy knows who Jesus is. From birth, from conception, he knew who Jesus is. He's not asking, who are you? He's a little upset that he's not being who he said he was. He's not saving me. You're saving them, but what about me? Well, I got to tell my friends, he's here to save you. And I think that if you're feeling like he's asking too much, your money, your time, your energy, you feel like he's taking too much of your life, I think you haven't met him. or you don't know him like you think you know him. John the Baptist does know him. It's just that circumstances got him down under, made him do something like send emissaries to say, are you forgetting me? God has not forgotten you. He has not looked past you. He knows you. He knows the struggle you're in. He knows what we went through. I've had more stuff happen in this last, I don't know how many years, 6, 8 years, than in the rest combined. I've had more negative stuff. Again, for some reason I said, there's no negative. And I got to tell you, no part of my life has ever been better than it is now, in spite of all the negative. I may have been upset when my son wasn't healed. Over and over I prayed. Oh, I hoped. I fasted. Fasting 40 days at a time. 5 times I fasted 40 days. Lord, hear my prayer. Didn't happen the way I wanted it. My granddaughter wasn't healed. My friend Jordy wasn't healed. Back when I was 19, my best friend, I made my way into the ICU. Knew it. I touch him, he's getting up, and he wasn't healed. And he died that night. But I've never turned back. God owes me nothing. I deserve nothing. I am not like John in jail wondering why he hasn't come to me. I've gotten mad at him a few times because he didn't do what I said. He didn't obey my command. He didn't do what I told him to do. He didn't perform what I wanted him to do. But I've never turned back because I've always been lucky enough or fortunate enough or blessed enough to remember you are God and I am not. You're the Lord. Your ways are not my ways. Your ways are above my ways. And I'm going to, just like the fire and every other one of these disappointments, I'm going to say, wait a minute. I know that you're good. I know that you're Lord. You don't have to look like I say you look. You don't have to talk like I say you talk. You don't have to do what I say you do. I will do what you say. I will talk like you say. I will follow you.
Thanks for watching the Father's House Orville YouTube channel, but don't stop there. We'd love you to subscribe to our channel so that you never miss a live service or a video. Help us spread the message of Jesus by sharing this video with your friends. You can also support the Father's House financially by clicking the Give button. Thanks again for watching today, and we hope to see you again soon.